Hey guys, Introspection here, and it is finally time for the Hispanic video. Now don't worry, despite the actual title of the video, I'm not going to be doing any singing. And I'm pretty sure that everybody with ears is going to be really happy about that. Now what I am going to be doing is telling you guys about some amazing people that just don't get the recognition they deserve. And I aim to change that. We're going to kick things off with Franklin CHANG-DÍAZ. This guy was the first ever Costa Rican born astronaut. After being inspired by one of his favorite TV shows and only $50 in his pocket, he went to America to pursue his dreams. Even with all these disadvantages, not only did he become an astronaut, but he's currently tied for the record of most times in space. And even after he got through this point, he continued to pursue his love of science and developed the plasma rocket propulsion system. This baby is even more powerful and efficient than any other rocket we have today. In fact, it is predicted that this thing is so powerful that it can cut the time to get from here to Mars from months down to mere weeks. Now that's all really cool, but I have a theory. I believe that the real reason that he developed this technology is because he wanted to make the ultimate marshmallow roaster. I know it's far-fetched, but come on, it'd be really awesome to try to roast a marshmallow, so long as you manage to not burn your face off. Now the next person on our list isn't an astronaut, but he is a pioneer in aviation. I apologize if I mispronounce his name, it's a rather difficult one to pronounce. Abbas Firnas. Again, I apologize. He was born in Spain, and he is the man who gave everybody else the ability to fly. Now, of course, your initial reaction is probably going to be something along the lines of, well, what about the Wright brothers? And yes, they definitely invented the aeroplane, which was an amazing feat of engineering and revolutionary ability to transport ourselves. But long before the airplane was even a thought, there were several gliders that have already been made. Now, not this one. This one's way more advanced than most of them back then. But the point being that gliders were an invention long before the airplane was. The airplane was essentially allowed us to sustain flight. Gliders just, let us glide. But they were essential in the creation of the airplane. And the person credited with inventing the first glider is, of course, this guy. Now, unfortunately, even though, yes, he did invent the first ever working glider, or at least on record, he didn't really think about certain things. He was so focused on being able to fly that he sort of forgot to consider landing. Didn't turn out too well. Yeah, he did live, but he was seriously hurt. But thanks to him and his sacrifice, we were able to build better ones and actually remember that we needed a way to land. And frankly, it sort of kicked off the whole aviation thing. And it's all thanks to this guy that we can get from one country to the other in just a matter of hours. Next up, we have Rigoberta Menchou. Now, she was born in Guatemala. As a little girl, she helped in agriculture. After a little while, her and her family became active in protesting the abuse of basic human rights. But unfortunately, this turned out to be very consequential to her and her family. While protesting the abuse of basic human rights, her father was gunned down and killed during the Civil War in Guatemala. Her mother was taken and killed, and her brother was kidnapped and brutally murdered. All because they were just trying to get basic rights for everybody regardless of how much money they have or their condition. They wanted equality for everybody, and because of that, they suffered greatly. Fortunately, she was able to make it through this and escape to Mexico. Now, even though she could have just sat there and tried to enjoy the rest of her life, she refused to take things lying down. She refused to just let things be as is. She went ahead and joined the efforts to fight against the injustice that was happening. She wrote a book informing everybody of what was happening in Guatemala during the Civil War. And even though she could have just sat there and attempted to enjoy her life, she didn't. She went ahead and fought. She got up and she did not back down, and because of it, things were made better. And rightfully so, she managed to earn herself a Nobel Peace Prize. And I think we just need to show a little bit more appreciation, because oftentimes what happened is that, yeah, we know about these people on occasion and we'll know what happened to them, but we never really sit down and really appreciate. I mean, come on, her family was brutally killed and she had to suffer for it, but yet she didn't stop fighting. So I think, at the very least, no, if she ever sees this, Miss Rigoberta, if you ever see this, I want you to know that I am saying thank you. Now, before I tell you about the next person, let me ask you this. You know that theory where the asteroid comes down to Earth and kills all the dinosaurs? Well, if you're like me, then you're probably going to say, yeah. Now, follow-up question. Do you know who came up with that theory? Now, if you're like me, prior to research, and the majority of the people I know, you're probably going to say no, and then you're going to think to yourself, man, I'm a little surprised I don't know who this person is. Like, you'd think that the person who came up with this theory would be a little bit more famous. I mean, the theory is so popular that even people who don't care about dinosaurs whatsoever probably know about this theory. And believe it or not, it's actually a 2-for-1 deal. It was Luiz Alvarez, the father, and the son, Walter Alvarez. These two are actually the ones who came up with this theory, and this is not the only thing they figured out. Luiz Alvarez actually worked on a linear accelerator which helped study subatomic particles and aid in the creation of the accuracy of dating certain things. And the son, Walter Alvarez, studied tectonic plates and made several discoveries there. So actually, now thinking about it, it actually makes sense that these two would actually come up with this theory. So I would say that these two are pretty dynamite people. Get it? Dynamite? Never mind. Moving on. Next up is Cesar Chavez. He was born in the United States and was instrumental to equal treatment there. See, as a child, his father was in a bit of a situation. His father essentially entered an agreement where if he cleared a certain amount of land, he got to keep half of it. But he got cheated out of that land, hired someone to try to fix it, and then that person ended up giving that piece of land back to the person he made the agreement with. So essentially, his father ended up with less than what he was promised, and Cesar Chavez learned that some pretty funky situations can happen for unfair reasons, which comes in handy later in life. After that, he ends up making it to 8th grade but has to drop out to work and support his family. Fortunately, though, following that, he becomes engrossed in education and study, becoming smarter and smarter and smarter, even though he didn't get the physical diploma to prove it. He then realized that a lot of people were in really, really bad situations simply because they were Spanish, and he decided, well, that's stupid. And I'm saying it now, he was right. That's stupid. So he ended up forming the National Farm Workers Associations, which, as you can see here, turned into the United Farm Workers Association, which helped in protesting the unfair treatment of Spanish farm workers. Now, unfortunately, though, a lot of people who were with him wanted to take the violent route. So, to prove that it was possible to do this without the violency, he went ahead and went on hunger strikes or fasting. He went for long periods of time simply to prove that you can get through this even without violence. But he was not alone. See, there was somebody else helping him. Dolores Huerta. She was also born in the United States and was equally as important in helping with this whole thing. See, she created the system, the Community Service Organization, which essentially helped teach Spanish farm workers about politics and how to fight this legally. And she worked with Cesar Chavez to create the United Farm Workers Association. They actually ended up agreeing that they should boycott grapes, and that's essentially how they pressured everybody into allowing fair treatment for the farm workers. Next up, we have Arminda Abella. She was a pioneer in Latin American psychology, making several discoveries. She was largely influenced by her mom and other family members, so she was already exposed to this kind of thing at a young age. After a while, she was recognized by the APA and she was able to join the APA, or the American Psychological Association. She was able to make several discoveries in the mental development of children and, of course, just everybody in general. Her discoveries allowed us to understand the human mind just a little bit better. And we're going to keep the ball rolling with Sylvia Mendez from the United States. Now, before I talk more about her, I'd like to discuss something else really briefly. The Brown versus Board of Education case. It's likely that the majority of you know that it was the case that helped make segregation illegal in the United States and was one of the cases that was a major step against racism. But you might be wondering why I'm bringing it up in the middle of a Hispanic video. Well, here's the thing. There was another case that happened a few years back before this one that is equally and arguably in some cases more important than this one.
See, it was the Mendez versus Westminster case. As you likely know, a few years before this, Hispanics were segregated just like other minorities, and just like other minorities, they were getting the short end of the straw. The case that Miss Mendez participated in was one thing that helped end that. The reason I say that it is possibly or arguably more important is because the Brown versus Board of Education case was using this previous case to make its argument. But one thing's for sure, they both were certainly a great blow against racism, or at least the result later in the years was. So one thing's for sure that I can say is that this case certainly deserves a lot more attention than it's currently getting now. Well, guys, that unfortunately marks the end of Spanish History Month. Unfortunately, all good things must eventually come to an end. But hey, you can still go over to my Instagram and like all my photos. And let me tell you guys, Spanish History Month, for whatever reason, was way more difficult than Black History Month. It took me a couple of hours to research for Black History Month. It took me weeks to find all the people for Spanish History Month. Oh, by the way, if you want to check out my Black History Month video, go ahead and look in the description down below. If you guys enjoyed this video and want more, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Go ahead and leave a comment down below if there's anything you want to tell me about making myself better, or perhaps somebody else that you think should have been included in this video. Otherwise, make sure again to hit that subscribe button and that bell so that you can catch my next video. Until then, hear nothing and listen to all. Bye guys!